tonight it's my turn to do the reading. I feel like I've really come so far in this world. And I wasn't originally sure what I was going to read, but the other day, after lunch, I was digging around in the free book room and ran across this book, The Most Precious Gift, honoring the life and work of Ajahn Sucitto, which is an anthology of some of his teachings that was put together at his retirement from the abbotship of Chithurst. And the theme of the winter retreat being Kruba Ajahns, I noticed that the opening part of this book is it's a sort of mixture of different people giving recollections and reflections on their experiences and relationships with Ajahn Sucitto over the years and as a teacher. And I just thought they were really kind of sweet and nice and interesting. You know, there's always kind of the ideal of practice, the theory of practice, and then there's the kind of mundane, tangible reality of what practice is and what practice looks like on a kind of day-to-day basis and in interacting with people. And anyways, I just thought they provided a kind of nice picture of that and of the benefits and joy that practice can bring and of the ways in which practice can change us over the long period of time. So I'll just read a sort of handful of excerpts. I'm not going to get a chance to read through all of them. And if there's still time, which I doubt there will be at the end of that, then I'll read some of Ajahn Sucitto's recollections of the early days with Luangpur Sumedho. And if I don't get to that today, then maybe if there's another one of these, I'll do that then. So to start, just going to read a couple of paragraphs from Ajahn Amaro's introduction. It is a sign of the respect and admiration in which Ajahn Sucitto is held that it was felt appropriate to begin the book with a number of recollections expressed by his fellow Dhammafarers, led by Luangpur Sumedho. For Ajahn Sucitto has not only been a source of guidance and inspiration for the vast numbers of lay people he has taught on retreat or who have visited Chittaviveka Monastery over the last decades. He has also been a major source of wise reflection and an exemplar of the spiritual ideal for his fellow monastics. The reader may notice that many of these recollections refer to Ajahn Sucitto's Maha Kassapa-like relishing of ascesis, the bitter practices of monastic training, particularly in the earlier years of his monastic life. However, it is striking that it is rather his Sariputta-like wisdom, as manifested in the lively thoroughness and intricacy of his Dhamma teachings, that has shone the brightest light into the lives of so many of us. As expressed in many of the recollections, Ajahn Sucitto's wisdom is multi-layered, astute, never repeating, and ever fresh in expression. It is this brilliance of the light of embodied wisdom that has touched so many so deeply. And so the first recollection that I'll read is from Ajahn Chandasiri, written in December of 2017. Over the years, Ajahn Sucitto has put an enormous amount of time and energy into making the extraordinary teachings of Ajahn Sumedho available, selecting talks, editing them, and arranging for their publication as books. It is extremely gladdening that now Sister Kitty Jnani has been inspired to prepare this collection of his own remarkable teachings. I've known Ajahn Sucitto for almost 40 years. My very earliest recollection is of a talk he gave one evening shortly after he had arrived from Thailand at the newly reopened Hampstead Vihara in London. His teaching was basic, raw, immediate, and practical. It comprised an encouragement to contemplate the experience of body. Since then, over several decades, he has developed many modes of recollection in his guiding of countless monks, nuns, and laypeople all over the world. My personal experience of him is as a true friend of the best kind, a Kalyana Mitta. totally committed both to his own liberation and to supporting others in their aspiration. Opening the door of his kuti at 4 a.m. and bathing in the freshly fallen snow was just one of the many austerities he seemed to delight in. However, rather than imposing the same rigorous standards that he would expect of himself on others, he finds ways of adapting his approach to the needs of an individual or group with humor and kindness. Some might think of him as a kind of Dhamma warrior, rather intimidating at times, but I have also observed a deep tenderness. One time, many years ago, he painstakingly studied knitting under the tutelage of an elderly friend. He had wanted to knit a pair of socks from the spun fleeces of sheep that had been grazing at Chithurst as a birthday present for Ajahn Sucitto. His account of the process of creating them was just one in his repertoire of hilarious encounters with practical matters, involving, among other things, sewing machines, old-fashioned printers, and, almost fatally, fungicide. He was also willing to share even the most intimate personal vulnerability as means of supporting us to approach similar aspects of our own life experience. Don't ever put doubt into your mind. Don't do that to yourself, is one of many sound bites I captured and noted down during a period of deep despair over my own practice. It eased my struggle. Ajahn Sucitto's teaching legacy is huge and perhaps the most significant contribution, although it may not have been appreciated by everyone, was the crafting of our nuns' training rule and procedures. The firmness and persistence he brought to that task has enabled a group of women of different ages, backgrounds, nationalities, and temperaments to live in practice in community for over 25 years, using a form based on the Bhikkhu and Bhikkhuni Patimokkha's, there being no such training previously available for women. Now his focus has turned to a concern for how we might best cope with the aging process and towards guiding our collective awareness towards the welfare of the planet. I strongly suspect that until his last breath, he will continue to share what he can for the ultimate benefit of all. I end with a most selfish wish. May he not take that last breath for a very long time. The next one is from Aya Metanandi, written in May of 2018. Ajahn Sucitto was always and continues to be the noblest kind of teacher. Wise, witty, kind, and generous, one who embodies the Buddhist teachings in remarkably refined and uncompromising ways. He became our hero when we learned about his fearlessness in the face of bandits in the forests of India. I dare say that serving in England as a Dhamma parent while in his 40s to a group of a dozen or so contemporary nuns called for courage of even greater proportions. I first met him when I arrived at Amaravati from Burma as a young nun in 1990, and he had the rare duty of acting as Mother Superior of our fledgling nuns community. He was truly a benevolent parent who provided both sanctuary and protection in the storms we weathered together. Like a giant tree with enough space between its branches for the sun to shine through, he gave shelter while allowing light for us to grow and glimpse the vast skies beyond. Through his own unwavering commitment to the path, Ajahn Sucitto became a mirror to us, reflecting both our goodness and our foibles with exceptional kindness. Despite his many other responsibilities as a teacher and leader of the whole community, he met regularly with our group of nuns. For him, this sometimes meant witnessing the less polished nuts and bolts of our perceived suffering. Ever formal and stern, yet respectful and sensitive, he would truly listen, hearing us out when we lacked faith. He had faith in us. When we were troubled, he studied us with calm and discernment. When adjudicating contentious situations, he balanced our reactivity. He could tease out the truth in the most fraught moments and tenderly, even playfully, point out a creative way to dissolve our tension. During one period of instability in the mid-1990s, many monastics, including some elder monks, were disrobing. There was great concern throughout the community. To reassure us, Ajahn Sucitto invited the nuns to meet with him and Lungpor Sumedho. After some Dhamma reflections, we shared an unforgettable moment when Lungpor declared, "Ajahn Sucitto and I will never disrobe." Seeing the expressions on the faces of our two leaders empowered us and restored our faith in the Sangha. They were our pillars. We felt their unshakable determination and devotion to the path. Not only was Ajahn Sucitto a pillar of the community, he also took a hands-on approach to leading us. He would work with us energetically for hours during the day, and in the evening he would deliver a stunningly erudite and heart-penetrating Dhamma talk. Whenever we were with him, whether at work or on formal occasions, he inspired us. We loved his unabashed honesty, dry humor, and wisdom, his grace, joyous austerity, and clarity. Deftly and artfully, he would bring out the best in us, the courage to face our pains, and the endurance to seek out the Dhamma that would take us beyond them. Over the years, Ajahn Sucitto has invited me to teach retreats with him. On several occasions, he could see that teaching in front of my Mother Superior was a cause of anxiety. Though he had dozens of retreatants to look after, he still took time to champion and encourage me, and he gave me the key to let go of fear so that I could find my Dhamma voice. This was Ajahn Sucitto's way with everyone. A tirelessly patient mentor, he never gave up on us. Though he could be fierce time and again, it was out of compassion. Like a mother protecting her innocent and ignorant child from an unseen danger, he would rescue us from our self-disparagement or fear. He would fluff up our feathers when we floundered and delight us with the riches of his teachings. Such a spiritual friend, the Buddha said, is 100% of the path, the treasure of a lifetime, worthy of homage and perpetual gratitude. His presence in this world is an immeasurable blessing. The next recollection is by the former monk Kittisaro, written in March of 2017. I first met Ajahn Sucitto almost 40 years ago in 1979 when we were young monks together at Oakenholt, a small Buddhist center in the English countryside outside Oxford. Both of us had just returned from Thailand. I was recovering from typhoid fever, and he was visiting his family after the death of his father. Although I didn't have much energy, and he was very quiet and somewhat aloof, I'll never forget the sheer joy that poured through us whenever we chanted the Paritta blessings together at special meal offerings, especially the victories of the Buddha, Jaya Mangala. When I remember Ajahn Sucitto, I'm inspired to begin again on this path of awakening with renewed faith, determination, and vigor, and not to get too disheartened by yet another setback. I once heard him say that enlightenment is death by 1,000 cuts. He took the long, patient view. Kittisaro, Mara works for a living. He's always on the job. When I think of Ajahn Sucitto, I see a bhikkhu's bhikkhu, someone truly dedicated to the spirit and embodiment of living the holy life to its completion for the ending of suffering, not looking for shortcuts, not preoccupied with the superficial highs, but focused wholeheartedly on the essence. From our earliest conversations and from listening to his Dhamma talks, it was obvious that he had a brilliant mind with a deep passion for investigation and reflection, and an extraordinary gift for articulating the subtleties of the Buddha's teachings. I have never met anyone else who could so skillfully relate the classical Pali terms to actual lived human experience. He brings the Dhamma to life year after year with a dry, brutally honest, self-deprecating humor and a quiet compassion. Having known the Ajahn for almost 4 decades, I've witnessed striking transformations in his way of being, which has richly blessed me and countless others. Not long after our short stay in Oxford, we moved to Chithurst and were part of the small group of monks and nuns who helped establish a forest monastery in the West Sussex countryside. In those early days, there was a lot of work just to repair the monastic residence. The place was a building site, and yet morning and evening chanting continued, as did the all-night sittings every week with the phases of the moon. For me, the young Sucitto was an intimidating intellectual and creative genius with a fierce ascetic motivation for spiritual practice and tireless service to the monastic community. He seemed quite unconcerned about the welfare of his body, however, and not very adept at bodily awareness. When he started writing, editing, and printing the first Chithurst newsletters, I remember seeing him one day covered in ink after a bout with the copying machine, or banging precariously into walls when carrying materials for the building restoration work. Although we would chuckle and kid him on occasion, and give him some space, he just quietly carried on undeterred. Once, he was the senior monk leading a puja in the old reception room in front of the elaborately layered Thai shrine, with various engraved tables and shelves adorning the Buddha image with flowers and candles. After the final bows, he solemnly stood up and turned to leave, with the monastic community reverently waiting for his departure. His robe caught on one of the tables, and the whole shrine slowly came crashing down. Without flinching, undaunted, he stood there quietly and looked at the wreckage with his inscrutable gaze. And then, without a word, he walked away. Whenever he noticed something out of balance within himself, dukkha, something he was averse to or struggling with, he determined right then and there not to avoid it, but to check it out and get to the heart of the matter. He did this without any fanfare or grand announcements. At first it seemed as if his motto was, "The more bitter, the better." Ajahn Sucitto wasn't afraid to suffer. Yet, as he deepened his cultivation of the way, he realized that the path was one of unification and integration of body, speech, thinking mind, and heart. He had tremendous willpower. But he saw that you can't bully the heart, it just rebels. Rather than viewing enlightenment as something to be conquered, he began to see the path as one of healing. Realizing that to a large extent he had become disembodied, like so many of us, and aware that many styles of meditation perpetuate and even exacerbate staying up in the head, he studied the Buddha's original teachings on samadhi and saw that they emphasized profound rootedness in the body, training ourselves progressively to be sensitive to the whole body as we breathe in and out, calming the whole body as we breathe in and out. I'll never forget his exclaiming to me, "Who took the body out of Buddhism?" So he dedicated himself to practicing conscious embodiment, mindfulness of the body. He began to balance unrelenting effort with embodied ease, and the results are impressive. I've seen the blessing of embodied practice transform Ajahn Sucitto from a clumsy, awkward, top-heavy genius into a calm, radiant, grounded, poised, balanced, and graceful presence. In the early days at Chithurst, we shared a tiny room. We had no heating, but we were warmed by the camaraderie of sharing our dedication to the path. In some respects, we were an odd couple, me lying down all the time, collapsed on the floor with the lingering effects of debilitating illness, and Ajahn Sucitto never lying down for months at a time as he undertook the ascetic sitter's practice. I knew he worked hard during the day with the building projects, and yet at night I saw him patiently leaning over his little desk for hours as he painstakingly illustrated the Buddha's first discourse with elaborate Celtic designs and intricate Buddhist symbols. We had a highly esoteric secret school practice to employ when it was bitterly cold. We imagined that the defunct cast iron stove by the wall, with Rose engraved on the front, was blazing away. "Old Rosie is really pumping out the BTUs tonight. I'm sweating, it's so hot in here." We put our hands up and warmed them in the luminous glow of our faithful fire. In those years, I started to feel a bit useless, lying there like a sack of potatoes while everyone else was working so hard. I was eventually given my own room in the attic and the opportunity to recuperate in peace away from the fray. Ajahn Sucitto used to drop by from time to time to check in and see how I was doing. I always felt better from his encouraging visits. One day he arrived after a hard day of working in the monastic routine, lay down flat on the floor next to me, splayed out, and sighed with satisfaction. "Kitty, it's hell out there. Dog eat dog. What a relief to come here to see you, a man pared down to the bone, a man of nothing." What a kind, compassionate, and illuminating gift he gave me. He helped me see that being sick, working with that and letting go into it was also an important offering to the community. Ajahn Sucitto's Dhamma is profound and subtle, empty and mind-blowing, trustworthy and enlightening. In so many ways, he's helped me and countless others deepen our understanding and stay with the gradually transformative process of awakening. But with all that brilliance and unstoppable determination to walk the noble path to its completion, he hasn't forgotten the power of kindness, the blessing of being a friend. 25 years ago in 1991, when Thanissara and I fell in love and decided to leave the monastic life, there was a lot of controversy about the situation, with strong opinions and judgments in various quarters about what were perceived as our selfish, deluded actions which harmed the Sangha. It was a difficult time. Soon before I left, Ajahn Sucitto walked up to me smiling. He said, "Kitty, I have my running shoes near the door. Who knows? I might be next." I didn't feel judged. He wasn't going anywhere or planning to disrobe. He was just being kind and compassionate, letting me know he could relate to our predicament. In the 25 years since that day, Ajahn Sucitto has been a wonderful teacher and true friend. On the occasion of Ajahn Sucitto's 70th birthday, I rejoice at this commemorative collection of his teachings and am grateful for his noble presence on this earth. Thank you, Ajahn, for your life, your inspiring example, and your kindness. May you be well. So the next one is in May 2018 from Nick Scott. The announcement of our first senior monk at Harnham wasn't that auspicious. Ajahn Sucitto phoned Richard Hopkins to say he couldn't send the monk he wanted to send, as that monk had to go home to Canada. "So I'm sending you Sucitto, but it will only be for 6 months." We had offered to rent a cottage as a small branch monastery in the north of England, found one in a small hamlet in Northumberland, and provided it with an inside bathroom and kitchen by working together at weekends. And now we were waiting, with anticipation for our monks. So who was Sucitto? Richard told me he'd been on the first meditation course led by Ajahn Sucitto we'd attended, but he hadn't been one of the 3 young monks we had seen sitting at the front, bolt upright and not moving during the meditation sittings or Ajahn Sucitto's talks. He was the other monk, staying at Oakenholt, who we only saw occasionally in the grounds, wearing oddly colored robes. They were more green than brown, and he didn't have the elegant deportment of the others. At the time, I'd assumed they had decided that he wasn't good enough to be on show at the front beside Ajahn Sucitto. But I also knew that it was this Sucitto who'd approved our cottage when he'd stopped off with Richard when traveling down from Edinburgh. A previous monk taken to see it had declared it uninhabitable, but Sucitto had told Richard, "What are you waiting for?" I was intrigued with whom we might be getting. Sucitto arrived with 2 others, a young and very enthusiastic Italian who had just become a novice, and a lanky Anagarika in white from northern England. There being few of us supporting the new monastery, we got to know them all well. We had to bring all their food and anything else they needed and to provide the transport. One regular ride was into Newcastle to lead the Wednesday evening meditation sitting. This had been going for several years by then, sustained by our small committed core, and we now looked forward to the positive effect having a monk would have on the numbers. We were misguided in our optimism. Our new monk liked to dwell on the Buddha's teaching on dukkha, suffering, in his talks, and few of the new people came back for more. At least his appreciation of life's difficulties meant he had no problem with the Spartan state of their accommodation. I remember the delight he took in their first shrine built of rough stone. He was also happy to take on the back-breaking work of renovating the cottage while living in it to provide something better for the future Sangha. Not that he was particularly skilled at such work. None of them were. I recall being shown a newly installed door lintel. I was the advisor, but only because I was renovating a cottage myself. We peered up at it together from beneath. "But why is there pot carved on it?" "That's not pot, Bhante. If you turn around, you'll see its top. They write that in the cement so you don't put it in upside down like that." The main job in those first 6 months was the epic installation of a damp course. The old cottage, empty for several years, was really damp when they moved in, so the 3 of them set to with hammer and bolster, stripping the stone walls of the first meter of thick plaster, and then drilling hundreds of holes for injecting the new damp course. The walls were thick and built of large lumps of local stone, including hard limestone and whin. As they were not that skilled, the long drill bits for the higher large drill regularly broke. Even the drill broke several times. Virginia Deeper would be called upon weekly to take them back. Eventually the hire firm asked, "Who the hell is using this?" Austerity and hardship were Ajahn Sucitto's way back then. The most famous example was one I discovered by chance. It was the Vasa, the 3 months rains retreat when Buddhist monks are particularly diligent in their practice. I had brought them their meal for that day. As I prepared it for serving in the kitchen, the young Anagarika, now an abbot in Italy, approached. "Nick, would you mind also offering this cake my mother sent?" I said, "Why? Surely you should keep it for another day when it would seem more special." "But then it would have to go in the bucket," he replied, his face crinkling with dismay. "My mother baked it specially." "What?" Venerable Sucitto, inspired by how Ajahn Chah sometimes had special curries all put into one large pot to stop monks getting carried away by the taste, had decided they would adopt the practice for the Vasa at Harnham. But only when the meal was not offered from outside, so we hadn't known. When Richard told Ajahn Sucitto, he sent them a box of chocolates, and Venerable Sucitto got the hint. Mixing several different special curries was one thing, but cake, curry, bread, and whatever stirred together in a large bucket with a wooden spoon was another. That liking for austerity didn't just create good stories. It had another side to it which I particularly enjoyed and appreciated. Venerable Sucitto had a wonderful sense of the absurd, an ability to be amused at the world and its misfortunes that would have me rocking with laughter. He also had a straightness, well, this is how it is, and we have to make the best of it attitude, that helped an over-optimistic and romantic guy in his 20s deal with life's setbacks and difficulties, and inspire him to keep practicing with them. When he was replaced after those first 6 months and returned to Chithurst Monastery, and later Amravati Monastery, I would seek him out whenever I visited. We all would. We'd become very fond of him, and he would get us laughing again at life and its difficulties. We went on to spend 6 months together, walking around the Indian Buddhist holy sites, and then jointly writing a 2-volume book about it, which is very good, by the way, if anyone's looking for things to read. At the start of that account, I relate the horrified reaction of others on learning that I was going to be with Ajahn Sucitto, known for his toughness and austerity. But actually, I didn't feel like that myself. I'd been pleased when Ajahn Sucitto had chosen him. It was his forthright honesty and commitment. I respected him. That in turn meant that although I often felt frustrated, I never got angry with him. His motivations were so selfless. And he held a standard for those 6 months, which I could never have come close to managing for myself. As a result, the Indian pilgrimage was the event in my life which had the most profound and beneficial effect on me. Those same qualities are what made him such a good abbot. He was just what young monks in training needed, someone inspiring to look up to, who set a high standard, but who was also really compassionate. After the pilgrimage, I spent 10 years at Chithurst as the Dhamma Hall project manager, while Ajahn Sucitto was abbot. Being close to him, I saw just how demanding that role could be, leader of a community of more than 20, available 24/7, while also being monastery front person and teacher to all the supporters. About once a month, we would get to have breakfast together, and he would share some of his current problems. I would have to regularly remind myself that I was the only person he could share his burden with, so I was hearing a disproportionate amount of the difficulty. But even so, it was some burden. Through experiencing that, I got to see how he, and it seems to me, Ajahn Sucitto and Ajahn Chah, got to be the exceptional beings they became. They all share a willingness to take that burden on, selflessly, diligently, despite it being something they didn't want to do. And they all started with that propensity for practicing diligently and with an austerity that we lay people can easily dismiss as over the top. They were very much like the early Christian monastic saints, those recognized without needing approval from Rome. One of them, Northumberland's St. Cuthbert, lived on a rock outcrop in the sea off the monastic island of Lindisfarne, in a small stone enclosure from which he could only see the sky, but then agreed reluctantly to become abbot and eventually bishop in Durham, and is venerated to this day for his wisdom and compassion. It's that surrender that's key. Others get to that point and just want to enjoy the fruits of their effort. In the monasteries of the 1990s, some of the monks and nuns were working with group therapy to deal with personal difficulties. Ajahn Sucitto was the senior monk supporting this and taking part himself. I recall one of our breakfast conversations where I pointed out how, in the East, many of the impressive old monks one met were actually quite wacky personalities. But they transcended that personality, not tried to change it. He agreed, and to me, that is what has happened to that odd monk I'd seen wandering in the grounds of Oakenhold all those years ago. And as with the early Christian monastic saints, we should now treasure him. If anyone has any questions, feel free to direct them to Ajahn Yaniko. Thanks for listening.
During Sister Chandasuri's recollection, I remembered that I got to attend Spirit Rock Retreat for a week with Ajahn Sucitto and Sister Chandasuri. They were both teaching it, and that was actually, I had been at Abhayagiri for about a year, and it was because I was too young to be on the driving list. I actually hadn't left the monastery for a single night yet, so that first time I left the monastery for a single night was to attend that Ajahn Sucitto retreat at Spirit Rock, so it's just really, really fond memories of that, and it's very powerful. 1-week retreat. We're trying to get him here. I recently traveled last year, May, first time ever traveling in Europe and England. So I got to visit Amaravati and Chithurst for the first time, and of course Ajahn Sucitto was here for this big gathering for Lumpur Sumedho's 90th birthday, and I got to have tea with Ajahn Sucitto one day, and he's still, even now, he still has that kind of humility, because he's been dealing with some heart issues and very low energy, and he was kind of telling me about it, and he's sort of also trying to still help with some work projects, and then he was kind of like, yeah, and then I'm just exhausted at the end of the day. Then I thought, well, you're running around all day long, working, of course you're exhausted. He's kind of making fun of himself. It's just a very, very rare quality. I found very inspiring.
Ajahn, was that the first time that you had met Ajahn Sucitto during the Spirit Rock retreat?
Yes, that was the first time I met him. Because I'd been here for a year. Ajahn Sucitto was visiting Abhayagiri before and after that retreat. So he was here, and then, so actually I first met him here, and then we went to the retreat together, and Sister Chandasuri as well. And it was, just remember it was, I don't remember that many details of it. I do remember I was always inspired by Ajahn Sucitto, because I also wanted to have this kind of, I was inspired by austerities. Like one thing I was doing, which is kind of funny at that time, was I didn't want to waste any of my food, so I would take I had seen about this Zen practice of when your bowl is empty, you pour water in it and swirl it around and pour it in your cup and drink it, so you're not wasting any rice grains. So I remember doing that, and they thought that was pretty funny. The way I was doing it was like very grim, like I was very serious. Like it wasn't a laughing matter, but they were. Also a story of a monk, a disciple of Ajahn Chah named Ajahn Jun, who's passed away a long time ago now, but he's considered one of the foremost disciples of Ajahn Chah, and he spent some time at Chithurst and Amaravati, and he was visiting there, and Ajahn Chun was known for his ascetic practices when he was a student of Ajahn Chah, and his monastery, Ranya Wewek, I think is what it's called. It was known as being an austere place, and then people were pointing out to him, oh, there's this young monk, he's incredible, he's so austere, and he's this Tan Sucitto, he's so ascetic and so austere, maybe he could give him some encouragement. And then, so Ajahn Jun went up to him and through an interpreter said, oh, I heard you're into austere practices, and kind of what are you practicing? And, oh, sitter's practice, and this and that. And Ajahn Jun, all he said was, you'll regret it when you're old.